guaranteed.
A dry start this evening, but rain developing overnight with isolated thundery bursts bringing a risk of spot flooding in places. Winds will increase strong and gusty near south and southwest coasts with overnight lows of 3 to 7 degrees. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
Yeah, you're very welcome back. Neil Treacy here with you on Off the Ball till 7 o'clock this evening. Now it's time to turn our attention to last night's game for the Republic of Ireland in Tbilisi, the scoreless draw in the Euro 2020 qualifiers, and looking ahead to Tuesday night's game against Switzerland in Geneva. Richie McCormack is joining me on the line now. Richie, you have gone from Tbilisi to Geneva in the last couple of overnight. How is all in Switzerland?
Picturesque, I have to say. You come in over the Alps. I'm kind of in a lovely hotel where you are being overlooked by the Alps and lovely ornate European Swiss buildings in around the corner as well. It's a lovely spot.
So it's a hell of a lot nicer view than you had yesterday in the stadium in Tbilisi of that match.
To put it mildly, yeah, that match was pretty grim viewing for absolutely everybody. I mean, it was a tough watch. Pretty much from the off. Georgia made life very, very difficult for Ireland, and more to the point, I think Ireland made life very, very difficult for themselves. Mick McCarthy, in his pre-match press conference the day before, had spoken about needing to use the ball and needing to keep possession and try and take the sting out of the game and dictate the pace of the game. And Ireland just didn't do that. Their midfield refused to really do anything with the ball. James Collins was completely isolated up front, and McCarthy said he put in a good shift and tried to do his best, but he was feeding off scraps, and scraps is being fair. And it just really didn't work from an Irish perspective. Yeah,
and I think the frustrating thing after the game was, for most people watching, was Mick McCarthy seemed quite pleased afterwards. And it contrasts to, you obviously interviewed a lot of the players yesterday. We played out some of it earlier on, like Seamus Coleman and Aaron Connolly, that, you know, okay, on one hand they were saying, look, we didn't lose, it is a point, whatever, but they didn't seem particularly pleased with their evening's work.
Yeah, it was a message that McCarthy drilled home. It seemed to the players as well. I think Seamus Coleman said to me afterwards that, you know, McCarthy said if they had gone into the group getting 4 points off Georgia would have looked like a good result. But ultimately, this isn't a good result. A point, and especially given the circumstances of what happened and unfolded later on in Copenhagen, really isn't a good result. Now, a win tomorrow night and all of this is moot and all of this looks, you know, absolutely pointless in talking about. But it doesn't augur well for what we might see tomorrow evening, because Ireland need to pick up their performance a hell of a lot to beat a Swiss side that are pretty decent.
Yeah, and even like we were looking through some of the player ratings today on the paper review and stuff like that, and it kind of jumps out that the two highest player ratings here in front of me, like Shane Duffy and John Egan, get 8 out of 10s, and everyone else is roughly in around that 5 and 6 mark. It kind of just sums up the evening Ireland had, that, you know, they looked comfortable defending, but
yeah,
why weren't they doing any more, I suppose, is the real question.
It's a strange one, because our midfield should be on paper able to get the ball down, able to play, able to bring in the forwards, able to bring the likes of Callum Robinson and James McLean into the game in a meaningful way, and possibly even from the centre create something themselves. And for some reason that isn't happening. You could see it at the start of the second half. Yesterday, they really wanted to get the ball down and try and take the sting out of the game and try and dictate things themselves. It didn't last long. Georgia, in whatever they were doing, managed to fritz Ireland's system and create their own chances and look like the more dangerous side for the duration of the 90. Now, it's something that we really need to rectify, and it's something that needs to happen quite quickly, because against a decent Swiss side, if you're pretty toothless in midfield and you're pretty bereft of ideas, as we were in midfield the other night, then we're going to be in trouble.
Have you picked up on any reaction in Switzerland to their defeat to Denmark yesterday?
Not just yet, no. To say my head has been down from travelling is to put it mildly. I was on about a 4:30 flight to Tbilisi time out of there yesterday into Istanbul, which is a hell of an airport, I can tell you, and then into here as well. So I kind of managed to catch up on a bit of sleep just before speaking to you that I hadn't actually had last night, if I'm being honest. But I'd imagine, because I saw the second half of the Denmark-Switzerland game, Denmark were pushing for that goal, and it seemed like it was going to happen. And I imagine the Swiss would be fairly disappointed with how the second half transpired, although that wonder save from Kasper Schmeichel right at the death, like literally from the last kick of the ball, really did deny them a point, and it would have been a point I think pretty much deserved. But they will be chastened coming into tomorrow night's game.
And finally then, did
Tuesday.
did Mick McCarthy give any indication about changes he's likely to make for that game? Obviously, Enda Stevens is back. A lot of people clamouring for Aaron Connolly to start.
Yeah, I would presume Enda Stevens is going to start instead of Matt Doherty. Matt Doherty, for all his brilliance for Wolves on the right-hand side of defence and as a right-wing back, really didn't show that, bar one surging run midway through the first half yesterday. So I'd expect Enda Stevens to come in. And as regards Aaron Connolly, I mean, McCarthy mentioned afterwards that he has been given a selection headache. That 10-minute cameo alone from Connolly showed that he is better playing off in behind defence than, say, James Collins will be. He's got a little bit more pace about him. He's got a little bit more guile about him. There's a little bit more, and I mean this in the playing sense, a little bit more cheek about him. That really could cause a defence problems. And I think at this stage, it behooves McCarthy to give Connolly a go. And if he does give him a go, to give him more than the 10 minutes we saw the other night.
All right, Richie, thanks a million for joining us. And we'll be hearing from you, I suppose, tomorrow morning as well on OTB I imagine. And Tuesday night as well, you're going to be in the commentary box with Stephen Doyle in Geneva.
Yes, indeed. We're going to have a decent tunes mix going on Tuesday before the match for me and Steve. I'll put it that way.
All right, speak to you soon, Richie. So we're going to have Gary Breen on the line now in just a few moments' time, looking back on that game. But as we mentioned, Richie spoke to a lot of players after the game. Earlier on this afternoon, we would have heard from Seamus Coleman and Aaron Connolly. And it's time now we can hear what Conor Harahan had to say to Richie. He said it was a point gained yesterday, but that he was left frustrated as he believes the team can play much better than what they showed.
Connor, it seemed like a frustrating night all round out there. We kind of felt it up in the stands. I guess you're feeling it very much so on the pitch today.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, it was frustrating for everyone out there. I think we know we can play better. Let's not underestimate them. I think they're a good footballing side. They're technically very good. They keep the ball, but listen, it's a point gained. The gaffer said in the dressing room there, 4 points over 2 games against them. We would have taken that. So listen. 4 points isn't bad off them, but a little bit of frustration as well because we know we can play better.
The message, I guess, from the stands looking on seemed to be at half time to get your foot in the ball, take possession of the ball and take the sting out of the game from the Georgian point of view. Was that what Mick said to you at the break?
I think we probably started the second half okay and kind of and then later the more it went on it kind of came the same as the first half a little bit. We wanted to put our foot on the ball and have that sustained pressure in their half, but we didn't really do that tonight. But listen, the most important thing is we didn't get beat either.
Seamus described the game as a bit helter-skelter. Is it something to go along with yourself, and can you pinpoint why exactly that was?
Yeah, listen, I think it was 100 miles an hour at times. We won the ball back and then gave it to them and they gave it to us, and a bit all over the place, to be honest with you. There wasn't too many clear-cut chances in the game. Aaron had one at the end and John hit the post. Maybe we probably had the best chances, even though probably they had more possession, but maybe it was a bit frantic out there as well.
Aaron Connolly seems like the kind of ideal player that you want to play alongside. He's always buzzing, always kind of looking for the ball. How's he settled in from your point of view over the last week?
Yeah, he's been fantastic, very, very sharp in training, sharp coming on tonight. Could have scored, but listen, I'm sure them goals will come at this level, but he's been fantastic.
He seems to have untold confidence for a 19-year-old.
Yeah, listen, he's goes about his business and throws himself around in training, and he's had a few fantastic finishes in training as well, so the lads know that he's a good player. And like I said, tonight you'll probably be a little bit disappointed with that chance. It was written in the lights for him, but no, listen, he'll be delighted to come on tonight, make that impact, and he'll be a good player for us.
I know you'll be having travel kind of arrangements to look forward to, but there's also a fairly big game in the group tonight. Denmark playing host to Switzerland. Will you have an eye on that?
Yeah, we'll have half an eye on it, see how that result goes, and listen, we'll be geared up and ready to go Tuesday night again. We're unbeaten in the group, and as much as it was a little bit frustrating tonight, we have to take big confidence from that.
How do you view the Swiss? How do you view the Swiss on Tuesday?
Listen, they're a good side. That they showed that in Dublin. They keep the ball well, and but listen, they'll have a bit of pressure behind them, I suppose, because they'll be favourites going into that game, and with their home fans behind them, they'll expect it to get the win. So we'll go there, like I said, full of confidence, unbeaten, and hopefully we can cause an upset.
Just on Aston Villa, you've had a pretty good start to the season, scored a most recent outing there as well after a little bit of an in and out with Douglas. Things seem to be settling for you in the Premier League. Yeah,
listen, they're going okay. Delighted with the last result against Norwich before coming away here. Been in and out of the side before that, but the last couple of games just seem to have gone alright for myself and the team, which is good.
What's Dean Smith's attitude been like? How's he kind of himself approached life in the Premier League?
Yeah, he's been fantastic. Same mentality every game, whether we play Liverpool, Spurs or Burnley or whoever, Southampton, he always wants to win games of football, so it's great to be a part of that.
And it's a great realisation for yourself to finally get up there to the Premier League.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, trying to enjoy as much as I can. trying to play as many minutes as I can, hopefully score a few more goals over the course of the season, because I like to do that, and yeah, it's going alright.
Connor, thanks very much.
Alright, cheers. Thank you.
Yeah, Conor Howran speaking to Richie after yesterday's game in Tbilisi. Gary Breen joins me on the line now. Gary, evening, how are you doing?
Good evening, I'm very well, thanks. You?
Full of enthusiasm, I imagine, after yesterday's performance?
Not really, unfortunately. I certainly was going into it. I felt there was a lot of momentum and it had been built under Mick McCarthy. But it just seems like it's lost a little bit there from that result. The result, of course, I know there's situations, those type of games where the result, another point on the board, we're in a healthy position. But the performance, more than anything, is what frustrated me. Listening to Connor there, I can understand what he's talking about, but having watched the game back, dissected it, I thought he was a big problem, to be perfectly honest. I've been a massive fan of his under Mick McCarthy, the only ever presence since Mick has come in. But I thought his positional play yesterday was poor, in that he was trying to get in advanced areas too early, and he wasn't getting hold of the ball there, and as a result he was neither here in terms of where he should be defensively and neither there where he should be offensively, and the game passed him by. I think if we play like that and that doesn't get addressed, I believe it will do. I think Mick will look at the scenario and think his starting position was wrong. It needs to be slightly deeper coming onto the game. But if he repeats that positional performance that he showed against Georgia, against the Swiss, I think we'll be in big trouble, bearing in mind the energy that Mbolo on that right-hand side has. Zakaria, I think we'll be in big trouble. So I think that really needs to be solved, and very quickly.
Is that kind of miscommunication and stuff, is that down to kind of maybe not being particularly comfortable with your playing partner, and you're anticipating the wrong thing at the wrong time, or is that just being too eager and putting yourself in the wrong position?
Yeah, I think this, in terms of being eager, I think he's desperate to do well, and I've been so impressed with him. Initially, when he came into Mick McCarthy's team, I was hoping it would show a bit more of his personality, a bit of his character, and we saw that in terms of how bullish he was, getting on set pieces ahead of Brady, who always used to be our main set piece specialist. But I just felt in that game yesterday, going far too early, leaving Whelan exposed. Because if you think about Glenn Whelan, I don't think he could cover the ground at 25, let alone 35. And this is the problem. We need a tight midfield. We need to be able to go on to the game. And it's not as if we needed him to be in those advanced areas, as if we were playing Route 1 football up to James Collins, because we weren't. And the problem we had then, there was a massive disconnect within the team. And I just felt at times, if Connor comes a little bit deeper, gives that passing option to his centre-halves, to Glenn Whelan, then it will have trigger points all over the pitch. It will enable James McClean to step in field and take passes at that 10 area. There was a couple of occasions where him and Robinson done that ever so well, but Connor wasn't using that quality left foot well enough to get him on the ball, and that was the frustration. I think Mick will look at that, because I think that they're very strong and very athletic in that midfield area for Switzerland. And
Jeff Hendrick obviously is the third member of that midfield three.
It's the same scenario again, just too quickly looking to get forward. And I understand why they want to get in advanced areas and support the lone centre forward, but it's about timing, Neil, in terms of how you do it. And at times I'm looking at centre-halves, and although that information will come from the sidelines from Mick McCarthy, centre-halves must be able to say, listen, you're going too early. We haven't got an easy pass. If you think about John Egan coming in, he's really comfortable on the ball. He likes to make those passes. But too often he got the ball, had to go square to Duffy. We had to go back through our goalkeeper. And I just felt that it just lacked that little bit of connection throughout the team.
And do you think that it was a poor performance? Was it down to they weren't actually executing the jobs they were put out there to do, or that the game plan itself was wrong, that Ireland, they were just kind of allowing Georgia to hold the ball and soak up the pressure and wait for a chance?
Well, I think if you haven't got passing options, you're not getting the likes of Hurahan on the ball, then you are going to struggle. And I think the game just passed him by a little bit too much like that. But let's not forget that this is a Georgian team that dominates possession every time he plays against us. Think about, they dominated possession in Lansdowne under Martin O'Neill. So this is not a surprise, but the very fact that they're ranked 91st in the world, they shouldn't be able to dominate the way they have. And if you think about Hendricks, Harahan, Whelan, they should be comfortable enough on the ball to get hold of that. There's three of them in that central midfield area, and yet we're seeing the same scenarios. Listen, Duffy's a giant for us. Of course he is, at centre-half. But the very fact that he drops so deep, so early, just makes that midfield space so big. And we don't have the athleticism to cope in there. And we haven't really. And since the days of Roy Keane, Lee Carsey, Mark Kinsella, Matty Holland, those type of guys who can cope in a two, we've got three players in there who don't have the athleticism to cope in a three. So I think Mick McCarthy, we heard it, I could hear him barking from the sidelines to that defensive unit, squeeze the pitch, condense that midfield area. But again, that desire to drop and get into that safety area on the edge of our box is our undoing. It really is.
And what changes would you be making to that midfield three then, if you were the manager or something like that going into the game against Switzerland to try and kind of quash out those mistakes that were being made with players going forward too early and just not timing.
Yeah, listen, I think he'll give Connor another opportunity to rectify that. Of course he will, and he should do in terms of how well he's played since he's come in under Mick McCarthy. Jeff Hendricks is a player that's looked better as well. So I think it'll be reminders again. Let's not forget, Alan Brown gives you that energy, can get in those advanced areas. Obviously got his goal against Bulgaria. So I'm not sure if he'll change it too much. I think if there's going to be any change, I think the obvious one is Stevens will come back in that left-hand side. And I think it's a key part for us, definitely. I think Doherty didn't really let anyone down. And I think there's a problem really that you can't get out on a right footer on the left-hand side as easy as you can with Ender Stevens. Remember how good that cross was from Ender Stevens for that goal against Bulgaria. But I'm just looking at it, it's just a real concern for me. I think about Severovic as a centre forward, really occupying our two centre halves, stretching the game. And as a result, then the energy of that midfield that the Swiss have, and Mehmedi from 10, bombing on from there, and Bolo from deep, Zakaria as well. I just think that left-hand side of our midfield and our defensive unit has to be spot on. I think if there's going to be any change, it will be left back. And possibly, again, is McGoldrick fit? I don't know whether or not. If he is, I think he'll play. If not, I can understand the kind of momentum building around Connolly in terms of what he gives you on the counter-attack, that pace, that drive, that real energy, in a way that James Collins, who put a real shift in for us. But in terms of the surface he must be looking around thinking, lads, I need more than this.
Yeah, and even on that, but when you're up against a country, I know you're saying Georgia have dominated Ireland in terms of possession and stuff down the last few years when we've played them, but when you're up against a team that are 90-something in the world... Oh, yeah. I
don't give that an excuse. Listen, they shouldn't be dominating.
But should we be looking at James Collins and saying in that kind of a game, well, he put in a shift for us?
Well, now, listen, he had a role to play, didn't he? But you have to say that he's out there for his physicality, to look after the ball, then to bring in that second line of attack from Robinson, McLean, obviously Harahan coming. But in terms of the balls up to him, Mick McCarthy has said it. We haven't looked after the ball well enough, and at times, as much as you want to have your Irish head on and saying, listen, lads, they put in a shift, they're a great bunch. You can't really legislate for that lack of quality. It was poor, and at times it was woeful in terms of how bad we were on the ball.
Is it like an attitude thing, kind of like you're almost allowing the team, you're convincing the opposition, you're allowing them in their heads to think, we actually are better than you? Should there be a bit more of an arrogance about the team, kind of, imposing yourself on them?
Oh, of course. This is international football. Every one of those players, and arrogance in a good way, in terms of I'm going to look after the ball, I'm going to dominate you. That's a gimme as such. And make no mistake, Neil, Mick McCarthy will be saying that to them players. He'll be demanding that they look after the ball better. I think performances like that yesterday, suddenly now you're starting to hear a bit of rhetoric in terms of people saying, well, maybe it wasn't that bad under Martin O'Neill. It was. And also people start to saying that Stephen Kennedy is a messiah or the saviour of Irish football. He's not. The issue at the time is still Mick McCarthy will demand much better than those players are showing, and it's up to them. Listen, we know that this isn't the most gifted squad in terms of what we've had over the years, but they're capable of better than that.
Yeah, that is kind of along the lines even of what we were going through in the Sunday paper review here, that the vast majority of reports are saying this was just as bad as the end of the days under Martin O'Neill. Is it down to almost the stage of the campaign we're at, where if we had got a draw away from home against Georgia early on in the campaign and beaten them at home later on in the campaign, you're probably not looking at those 4 points as being particularly bad, but when the opportunity was there last night to go out and win, and you're almost putting 1 foot into the finals at that stage. There's one more point needed off those last two games, that this was the opportunity to pick up a win.
Yeah, listen, in terms of Mick being bullish in the press conference afterwards, he's saying 4 points, but this was a missed opportunity, there's no doubt about it. And effectively, if you drop points in Georgia, it costs you European qualification. It has done historically. Scotland had the initiative. They lost points there. We then managed to qualify for the last Euros. You're looking at Denmark and thinking, is that the deciding moment? Dropping 2 points there. Can we take advantage? I know it's a difficult game and away games are as such, but it felt like a free hit. We could go after them. I think we could have put them under far more pressure than we did. And that would have been the instruction from Mick McCarthy. Make no bones about it. There's a perception that he's a defensive-minded coach. He's not. He's an offensive-minded coach. But he's pragmatic at times to say, well, listen, I'll take the point and we'll go again. But I think he'll look at that and he'll be disappointed with those lads. He'll back them. I've no doubt about that. But he'll be disappointed that they didn't perform better than they should have done.
And so the net result of that is one win in the last 2 games is absolutely necessary because, well, barring Gibraltar going out and beating one of Denmark or Switzerland over the next month or so, which I think we can all assume is probably not going to happen, but one win in those last 2 games. Pretty tough games, though. Away to Switzerland this coming Tuesday and then Denmark at home next month. Obviously, the history we have with Denmark, we haven't had a win over them in these few games we've played against them. Is it difficult to see where the 3 points is coming in those 2 games?
No, I think I can see the 3 points coming at home to Denmark. I find that is a potential 3 points far easier than Switzerland is away. I think Switzerland have really put themselves into a difficult position, but let's not forget they've qualified for 7 of the last 8 major championships, so they know how to get the job done. And I think if you look at their fixtures now, they'll expect themselves to win all 3. So I think you're looking at it then, and I felt this all along, Neil, to be perfectly honest, that Denmark game, the last one of the campaign, was always going to be the one. And I think that a really bumper crowd, the Aviva, you would hope that the crowd can play their part because they need to, because this team can't do it on their own. They're not that good. And I think that will be the deciding game, to be perfectly honest, because I'm looking at that Swiss team and I know they've dropped points late on. And listen, it's not beyond us, without a shadow of doubt, in terms of getting a result. You think about a set piece, something like that. I don't think they were particularly convincing of that. But in terms of opening them up, it'll be very difficult. And I think that they'll dominate possession. They make that back 5 system that they play makes the pitch so big. I think we lack athleticism at the best of times, so that's going to be a difficult one. And if you remember, there was a period just before half-time when they played in Dublin where Mick went to a back 5 to counter it. So I think he'll have them drilled that way, but it'd be interesting to see just who gets a nod at centre-forward.
Is there a glimmer of hope maybe that if Ireland get a draw against Switzerland this coming Tuesday and if Denmark are to go and win their game, that pretty much puts Denmark through? We almost kind of want them to go out and do their stuff and have their place in the Euro 2020 booked by the time they're coming to Dublin. I know it's probably a backwards way of looking at it, but it's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, this is what we do as supporters. Of course, we're trying to work out every scenario. But if you're telling me now, would I take a point in Switzerland? I would absolutely rip your hands off for it.
Certainly, yeah. So in terms of Switzerland then in particular, you were saying you've watched a good bit of them. You watched back their game against Denmark as well. They have threats everywhere pretty much, don't they? They
do. And we talk about Severovic, I said, big, robust centre forward. We'll occupy both of our 2 guys. I thought John Egan done well in his competitive debut. But I just worry about him being a little bit square on at times. If we squeeze that pitch, what I want us to do, we've just got to be careful of those runs from deep, that second line. If you think of like Zakaria's athleticism in midfield, if Harahan is in an advanced area and we're leaving Glenn on his own, we're in big trouble. I remember even in the first game, after about 25 minutes, Glenn was very lucky not to go into a book when he couldn't live with a deep run from midfield. So that would be a concern. Mamadi as well in that 10 area running off of him. They've got real energy. Xhaka will look to get control of the ball. I would expect Mick to try and put someone in around him to affect him because he's an emotional type. He's liable to lose his head if it's not going particularly well. So there'll be all those little bits of dark arts that we need to do. But ultimately, as in any game of football, and certainly at international level, you've got to look after the ball far better than what we did the other night. It just wasn't good enough.
And if there is something that Ireland can take advantage of in that Swiss team, what is it? Is there anything?
Well, there is in terms of the scenario that they've got themselves in. I alluded to the fact that I would expect them not to panic. They should be in control. They're at home. They should back themselves in terms of the system that they have. Obviously, and I know it's something that we're tiring of hearing, but we are a threat at set pieces. There's no doubt about it in terms of how dominant Duffy is attacking the ball, Egan as well. But you just hope that the likes of Hendricks, Hurahan just can get a little bit more control, because ultimately, if they don't get hold of the ball, there's so many knock-on effects. It means that McLean can't get the ball. It means that our fullbacks can't get in advanced areas. It means our centre-forward are detached. And that's why that we saw young Aaron coming on with his enthusiasm, getting in just really on big clearances and just running in behind. We need more control. We need to give him continued service. Whoever's playing centre-forward, to be perfectly honest. But there's no doubt that you would expect Aaron now, in terms of the confidence, the week that he's had, you'd want to tap into that. And Mick's no fool. He'll know. It looked like it was written in the stars when he went clean through late on. But I'm certainly thinking that he'll play a bigger role than he did the other evening.
When you say bigger role, do you think maybe from the start or just on the pitch earlier?
I think certainly on the pitch earlier. I don't know if you have had any information in terms of where McGoldrick is fitness-wise.
No.
I think if he is fit, then I would expect him to lead the line because he does link us better than any centre-forward we have. But I wouldn't be surprised if Mick goes with Aaron. He would have probably looked at the scenario James Collins and shift he put in. But again, I know that people don't want to hear this and it's not this expansive football, but James Collins had a role to play defensively because I've been surprised at how vulnerable we still looked under Mick, bearing in mind I know how much stock he'd be putting into coaching his players to defend set pieces. But again, as we saw against Bulgaria, they had 2 chances in the opening couple of minutes, opening 6 minutes. We still don't look convincing, and that's probably why Mick feels the need to have that big centre forward to come back and help the centre halves. But we need to win the games. Draws won't be enough at this stage.
All right, Gary, thanks a million for joining us as always.
Thank you, pleasure.
All right, that's it for now. We'll take a break.